Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. And in a unanimous vote and a rebuke of Tennessee Republicans, the Nashville Metropolitan Council on Monday voted to reappoint Justin Jones to the State House of Representatives. Jones returns as an interim representative and will again act on behalf of House District 52. It was a 36-0 vote, which came after the council suspended its rule that disallowed an individual from being nominated and appointed to the seat in the same meeting. A spokesperson for House Speaker Cameron Sexton said he's going to go along with the council if they choose to send Jones back to the House. He also indicated that he'd also welcome back Justin Pearson if Memphis officials voted later this week to return him to the House as well. In the wake of still another mass shooting in America, this time at an Old National Bank in Louisville, Kentucky, the nation is left reeling. At least 4 people were killed and 8 others were injured, 2 of whom are in critical condition. And the gun violence issue is what drove the Republicans to drive out Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. The shooter in the Kentucky shooting believed to have had a connection to the bank. Authorities say that he was a disgruntled ex-employee. He killed at least 4 people. As another individual clings to life, that death toll can easily rise. Police responded quickly, arrived within 3 minutes, and you could see some social media video hearing the gunshots and cops trying to move people from the scene. It was an awful scene in Kentucky where the governor, Andy Beshear, expressed grief over losing 2 close friends in the shooting and having another personal friend injured. The bank where the shooting occurred is where the governor banks. And also the mayor of Greenville, the mayor of Louisville, his name is Craig Greenberg, asked people to pray for those fighting for their lives. So again, the top story, again, Justin Jones reinstated as a representative in the state house, and the shooting in Kentucky with increased national attention and resources directed to the maternal and infant health crisis in our country, with Black women in particular being 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. Solutions to improve outcomes and tackle disparities still haven't been found completely. However, some studies do point to one long-time federal program which has at least helped improve birth outcomes and lower the risk of infant mortality. The Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or as we know it, WIC, has, according to some studies, reduced the risk of preterm birth by 10 to 14% and low birth weight by 11 to 24%. In a 2022 study at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine revealed that WIC participation was also associated with a 14 to 40% reduced risk of infant mortality. Today, we speak to Dr. Jamila Taylor, the president and CEO of the National WIC Association. Dr. Taylor, welcome to the Black Press's Let It Be Known.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. So let's just dive right into it. We know that this week is Black Maternal Health Week. There's been a troubling and gradual decline. We're going to talk a lot about WIC, so we'll start there. There's been a troubling and gradual decline in WIC participation since the pandemic, when coverage was pretty much steady. Well, has there been anything to suggest the reason for this?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of it has to do with the fact that, the situation has changed for families all over the country. The pandemic made it so much harder for families, particularly those in need of social supports, to link up and access the services that they, have been beneficiaries of for so long. And so that has been a real problem. But at the same time, the WIC program, including all of our staff across the country, have really swooped in to shift how they provide services to make it more reliable and accessible to families across the country, considering the other challenges that they're experiencing right now.
Yeah, and given the studies that have shown the benefits of WIC, including what participation can do to help the infant mortality rate, because we talk about that all the time, right? And rightfully so, the infant mortality rate, particularly with Black women. Why is it that it seems white women still outnumber Black women by a wide margin in participation in WIC? The USDA says that the coverage rate declined from 53% in 2016 to 50% in 2020 for Black non-Hispanic women.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to preface this by saying that across the board, we still aren't reaching all of the families that qualify for WIC. Right now, we're only reaching about 50% of the families that qualify for the program. And if you sort of take a step back and look at some of the structural inequalities and barriers that Black families tend to experience compared to white families, you get a look into why this is. And so, first of all, even knowing about the program in the first place can be a challenge for families of color. Part of it is also, making sure that you can sign up. Another thing that was a flexibility that was put into place during the pandemic was allowing families to be able to sign up virtually.
Right.
So whether it's through the telephone or online communications, that has been helpful in helping to get families looped in. It could be something as simple as having transportation challenges, or the hours that the WIC clinics are open do not fit within your work schedule. And so that could be a challenge for families to sign up. So it really is a whole host of issues, but it really boils down to the fact that families of color, particularly Black families, have more of those institutional challenges and barriers that they're experiencing in day-to-day lives that make it harder for them to sign up for the services that they desperately need.
And how do we overcome those barriers? And how do you continue to get the word out? What is being done to get the word out?
Absolutely. So the National WIC Association is working really closely with our members across the country who are working for the WIC program and working on the front lines to serve families to boost recruitment and retention of the program. And so everything from instituting campaigns to get families sign up, thinking creatively about some of the targeted areas or localities that, where localized WIC staff know specifically about the communities that they're serving. And so, we've been able to work with some of them to think through, okay, should we set up shop in the local library or at a bus stop or on a schoolyard to, where parents are picking up their children, to make it easier to get the WIC program in front of families, particularly moms that need it the most. There are also some really innovative opportunities to work with pediatricians, offices and other physicians, primary care as well, to help them, work through those centralized locations to also sign up families for WIC. So really thinking creatively about getting them into the program and keeping them into the program for as long as they qualify has been really essential.
Yeah, and you mentioned the pediatricians, the medical community. I'd imagine, Dr. Taylor, that's also been sort of, in some ways, a challenge, given how the relationship between the Black community in particular and the medical community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unfortunate that, the Black community, there are people in our community that still feel mistrust when it comes to interacting with the healthcare system. And, as much as we can do to sort of work on making sure that our communities have access to healthcare, health insurance, programs like WIC, transportation, safe, affordable housing, you name it, those challenges with trust in the healthcare system really span generations. And so part of it is really to think deeply and be thoughtful about how we're educating our communities, working through some of that mistrust, finding out where it comes from. We know that historically, it is proven that we have had reason to distrust the healthcare system. But having a conversation and helping to dispel myths, I think, is a key to that. And look, today we're talking about disparities in Black maternal health. But really, when you look across disparities across a host of health concerns, you see some of these similarities. And the commonality in all this is, part of it is this distrust of the healthcare system. And we really need to break that down.
Yeah, and I would also imagine that exacerbating things too. Last year, we came to understand the baby formula shortage that affected the program, particularly with low-income families. What has been done to try and navigate that?
Right, absolutely. And, who can blame a mom, right, who, is supplementing, whether, trying to meet her breastfeeding goals by supplementing with infant formula if she needs it, or if she's exclusively breastfeeding or infant feeding, to find out that, that there has been a shortage of the formula that she needs. And so we saw, hundreds of thousands of moms across the country deal with the anxiety of trying to find the resources and support they needed to feed their children. And so WIC staff really jumped in there to support families on the front lines, helping them navigate some of those challenges. We saw an increase of breastfeeding actually during that time among WIC clients because our staff were helping them navigate their goals in the midst of these challenges. And WIC staff were also helping to help families find the formula, where they needed it, but still the shelves were not stocked where they needed to be. Also want to take a step back and acknowledge the fact that the federal government did swoop in and allow additional flexibilities in terms of accessing formula, things like, for temporary periods, allowing, families to use their WIC benefits for other brands, which was helpful in having those flexibilities, as well as really working to find this particular source of the bacteria, source that for the avid plant, and then also working with formula manufacturers to help address the issue. But this is going to be a long-term process, to be completely honest. NWA has been focusing on our work and advocating for the fact that we need long-term solutions to this infant formula crisis. It should have never happened in the first place.
Yeah, we're talking to Dr. Jamila Taylor, the president and CEO of the National WIC Association. We certainly appreciate you coming on. There's a 2022 medical journal report that talks about anemia during pregnancy increased among WIC participants, especially for Black women. Have you seen that study at all? And why would that be?
I have not seen that study, to be honest, and, am not a medical expert on anemia, so I don't have, a lot of insight into why that is exactly happening. But I will say too, a part of, the population of families that we work with in WIC are already, to a certain extent experiencing some sort of food insecurity or challenges in accessing nutritious foods. And so I would imagine that there is a linkage there in terms of, this, anemia, as well as other, medical conditions that can be directly related to health and nutrition, and how those things intersect in the grand scheme of the lives, particularly for moms and babies.
Yeah. And Dr. Taylor, can you kind of walk us through the process of how one qualifies and signs up for WIC?
Absolutely. And so, WIC is a program that is designed to support, particularly low income families with supplemental nutrition services. And so oftentimes, a pregnant woman or a mom in the postpartum period, so, shortly after she's had her children, she's able to sign up through the program, whether it be through her healthcare provider. And locally, there are WIC clinics and providers across the country. And so, some of these sites are set up as individual clinics and sites, and others are tacked on to other, social services and supports. There are also a handful of states that also are allowing families that need to sign up for multiple social support services to do that in one place, whether it's through one application or going to one website. And so that is something that we've also seen be very, be helpful to families. So they're not sort of running around to different locations to sign up for the healthcare services that they need. So really making it more convenient for them. And so, WIC is designed to meet families right in those moments where they qualify and need the services. And so a lot of times going through their other social supports and providers is a piece of that, but then also having standalone locations really all over the country. You'd be hard pressed to find a person in this country that doesn't know about the WIC program themselves or doesn't know somebody who's been on the program or benefited from the program.
Yeah, and Dr. Taylor, you did speak on the barriers that particularly women and families of color face. Is the application process at all complicated? Is there things that people might find complicated?
It really depends on, where you live and what the application process looks like. In some places, as I mentioned, families are able to sign up online or through, mobile applications. They're able to call in and have remote certifications. And so that is certainly a piece of it. But also I want to take a step back too and talk about, some of the other challenges, even as we have technological advances that are able to meet these families. You still have families that live in rural areas that don't have access to broadband support. That's a challenge if you want to sign up for WIC and you don't have that support. You have families that still have issues with digital literacy. They may not know how to use an application or going online. And then also language barriers are still a challenge, particularly for families that aren't English speakers, right? And the WIC programs have done a better job of helping to meet those needs, but it's still a problem in several areas of the country. And so as a community, we're working more to break down those barriers to make sure all families who qualify for the program can sign up and do so with the support they need.
Have you still found a stigma attached for women of color, families of color when it comes to WIC?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would say that this is an issue with WIC and across Medicaid, across a whole host of social support services, which is unfortunate, right? Because you don't see the same stigma associated when white families sign up or benefit from these programs. And again, I want to link that stigma back to, some of the historical foundations of racism that we've seen in this country when it comes to, Black women, whether it's signing up for birth control, for example, or, other TANF or other welfare programs. Unfortunately, you continue to see some of those same perspectives when it comes to families signing up for programs like WIC even today. And so again, another barrier we need to be working to break down when it comes to supporting our families.
What do you say to someone who you find out, the reason they're not signing up because of the stigma that's been attached? What do you say to that individual or individuals?
I would say to them that, the stigma is not based on you, right? Like this is a service and support that you need for your children and yourself to lead healthier lives. And it's there to be a benefit to you. I think another thing too, in terms of the stigma is, we know that there have been stigma associated with the paper vouchers that have been a part of the WIC program for so many years now. And now there are places that you can use your benefit where you don't have that paper voucher. You can use a card or a QR code from your phone. And we've seen some similarities too, even with the SNAP program as well, the food stamps program. And so I would say to families that, these are largely built to be temporary supports for your family, and it makes sense for you to benefit them and support the well-being of yourself and your children. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, and how do you? Let me give you an example of the question I'm about to ask. In Iowa, for instance, and you mentioned SNAP, which is a separate
Hmm.
program. The lawmakers in Iowa are trying to, I don't know if they've been successful, but trying to mandate that or prohibit the use of SNAP benefits to buy fresh meat, right? Which seems absurd, I would think
Absurd.
is absurd. How do you continue to, what do you do to continue to protect the WIC program?
Yeah, the WIC program is different from SNAP in that, it is sort of focused on or authorized to be a supplemental nutrition program. So it is a science-based food package that families can benefit from based on the nutritional value of whatever their needs are. So whether the mom is, in the postpartum period and breastfeeding, there's a specific food package for her nutritional needs versus a mom who is pregnant, and so forth and so on, as well as for children, right? And so there are also benefits of the WIC program. And so I think at the end of the day, our focus is to continue to follow the science, and we sort of lean on that when we have these conversations, or even industry back and forth on what types of milk should be included in a food package as a part of WIC, or whether or not juice should be included, and so forth and so on. For us, at the end of the day, it's really about having the most nutritional value in the food packages that we offer to family, because that is a part of the mission of the program, to support the nutrition and well-being of families, whereas SNAP is a little bit different, and families do have a choice to access foods, sort of outside of some of those nutritional standards and guidelines that we abide by. So to me, it makes sense for families to have access to both, where they qualify. And so it helps meet their broader, grocery and food needs for households.
Yeah. And finally, Dr. Taylor, I know we talked about the health disparities, but and WIC being just one piece of that puzzle to
Mhm.
addressing the Black maternal health disparities. Um, Talk about, if you will, and break down for us, what else WIC can do, the program
Mhm.
can do to continue to promote healthy pregnancies, healthy health outcomes that are more palatable. I mean, obviously, no death would be the best outcome.
Yeah.
So what can be done to continue to push this thing in the right direction?
Yeah, and I'll answer it by saying this, whereas WIC is an important tool in the toolbox, it cannot fix the maternal health crisis in this country, or the infant health challenges, particularly that Black women are experiencing in this country. So, in an ideal world, everyone that is able to, access WIC or qualify for the program will be able to sign up and get the nutrition support that they need. At the same time, we didn't get to talk about it in the program, but another big challenge when we think about the Black maternal health crisis is the fact that many Black women aren't listened to by their healthcare providers,
Yes.
right? And so we are not going to address this crisis until we deal with the mistrust that I mentioned, earlier in the program, and the fact that, too many Black women are dying needlessly of preventable maternal deaths. 80% of these deaths are preventable.
Wow.
80%.
That's
And there's
unacceptable.
research. Absolutely, it's unaccessible. And we know that the root of that, to be quite honest, is racism and structural inequality in the healthcare system. And we see that translated into these interactions or power imbalances between Black women and their healthcare providers, where they are simply not listened to when they express pain or discomfort. And so WIC is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not going to be the end all be all. It has to be coupled with these other interventions. And a key part of that is addressing racism in the healthcare system.
Yeah, it's something what you just mentioned about not being listened to. I always, when we talk about this topic, when we mention this topic, I always go back to, and I encourage our audience to read Serena Williams' story, because I think
Absolutely.
I think it's important to note that it's just not low income Black women, it's Black women across the board. Here you have a very wealthy, prominent person who talked about her healthcare team not listening to her, which nearly cost her life.
Absolutely. It's across socioeconomic status. And in fact, a Black woman with an advanced degree is more likely to die of pregnancy related causes than a white woman who did not finish high school. And so that goes to show
Wow.
you know, the sort of breadth and depth of this problem. And it's something that we can solve. Like I said, 80% of these deaths are preventable. And so we really need to drive resources to focus on centering Black women in the response, because that's the only way that we're going to solve the crisis, if we center Black women and their needs and the response to this crisis.
And on that note, as before we close, what can folks like us or just the everyday folk do to help with this cause?
Absolutely. Well, first off, you know, as you mentioned earlier, this is Black Maternal Health Week, and so would encourage listeners to tune in to, you know, wherever you get your media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, any social media channel right now. You'll see folks talking about Black Maternal Health Week, which is April the 11th through the 17th. So wanted to flag that. And in that process, you'll also see a host of organizations, many of them Black-led organizations, that are leading the charge to address this crisis. So if you can, you know, find out how you can support those organizations. I think that's a key piece of it. I think also too, there's legislation that is introduced at the federal level, as well as some states as well, that sort of focus in on the Black maternal health crisis. One piece of legislation is the Black Maternal Health Omnibus, introduced at the federal level by Representative Lauren Underwood. That is a piece of legislation that is comprehensive. It includes about 12 bills aimed at addressing various dimensions of the Black maternal health crisis. So support the Black Maternal Health Omnibus, or tell your representatives in Congress to support the Black Maternal Health Omnibus. And then obviously supporting programs like WIC, you know, as well as other social supports, Medicaid expansion. You know, we have the tools to address this issue at our disposal. We just need the political will to do it. And the best way to get the political will to do it is for you all to engage and let your voices be heard.
Dr. Taylor, we certainly appreciate you sharing this vital information. As Black Maternal Health Week begins on the 11th, but it should be Black Maternal Health Day every single day of the year. So let's keep up the push and continue to support and find out what the National WIC Association is doing as well. They have a website. You can look them up, and we'll continue to follow you on Let It Be Known. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.